Hey, everybody. Welcome again to the Tracer Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about a concept called activation energy. Now, activation energy really is a concept that comes from chemistry, but as we'll discuss today, it's highly relevant to the way we train as endurance athletes. In fact, I think it's one of the things that can most drastically affect your fitness. And not only your fitness, I think it could drastically affect your life, kind of understanding this concept and how it relates to us as humans. So there's no better person to join me in this conversation today than a guy named Max King. He's not only a world champion trail runner, but he also has a chemical engineering degree from Cornell, I believe. And as always, Max, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. So thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. This is Max. Max is a regular around here. So yeah. So before we get started, Max, I'm just noticing in your background, you got a huge box of Reese's.
Joey, I just tried to I tried to move that before we started the podcast, but you wouldn't let me. So it's not a box of Reese's. It's just holding some stuff.
I didn't realize pro runners eat candy like that, Max.
Well, so yeah, I need my energy, man. It takes a lot of energy to run a lot of miles.
That's one thing I love about Courtney Dauwalter, and most runners these days are pretty open about that stuff. But I love how Courtney's just always talking about how she loves McDonald's and she loves her candy.
Yeah, man. It's energy.
So before we get started, what's going on in your training life right now? What's on Max King's mind, and what's next in racing or training?
It's ski season, so been trying to get a lot of skiing in. Broke my boot the other day, so skiing's out for a couple of days until I get a new part. But been trying to get some skiing in. The weather's been, it's been stormy, but good snow, bad weather, and just still trying to get some runs in here and there as well. But just looking forward to the spring. So. Yeah, just trying to get in shape, stay in shape, and get ready for the year ahead. It's the base.
Yeah, awesome.
It's the base building time right now. Just laying down a base. Got in a 4.5-hour run yesterday with 8,000 feet of vert. That was only 14 miles, so it was just really slow hiking. It was good.
I call that fast hiking, and don't call it slow. You're insulting the rest of us. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. And did you break this ski boot on this epic cliff jump that you posted on Instagram where you went flying off this huge powdery pillow and crashed?
The conditions were a little rough the other day, and I jumped off that cliff. It wasn't a very high cliff, and my skis just stuck, and I just went...
If any of you are listening to this, go on Max's Instagram. I don't know if it's still up.
No, I think it was a story. I think I put it up as a story the other
you need to post that. But there was an awesome blooper of Max going face first into the snow off of like a 5-foot cliff.
Yeah.
It was pretty good.
What's funny is that was the second time I did that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to nail it this time. And then I do it again. And of course, like skis stick and I just go.
It's awesome. All right. Well, every conversation we have here on the Tracer Podcast is intended to help our listeners get better at endurance sports like trail running. And so for those of you who are here for your first time, my name's Joey Wilson. I'm one of the founders of Tracer. I have a PhD in electrical and computer engineering, and I'm just a deeply technical person. I love that kind of stuff. And so my role here in this podcast is really just to be your guide in simplifying technical concepts and scientific concepts into takeaways that you can actually have and use in your life and get faster. And so that's my role in these conversations. And Max is obviously a pro runner, has been a pro forever, and has won a gazillion races. And so hopefully this conversation does exactly that, gives you some takeaways that will make you better. And that's what Tracer's goal is in general. Like, our goal is to just help you smash your goals. So we do that through these discussions, but we also do it through our app. We have a innovative training program app that you can check out at tracerfitness.com. And we'll put a link in the description. And Max has various training programs on Tracer. So definitely check that out. It's a game changer. And I mean, people just get way faster when they use it. We have many success stories at this point, including my own. So go check it out. So Max, we're going to dive into activation energy. So here we go. Tell us, Mr. Chemical Engineer over there, what is activation from a chemistry standpoint? What is activation energy?
Yeah, so I had to go way back into my textbooks, back to 2000, and bring back the chemical engineering. I used to talk about this a lot, actually. This is pretty good. Dive back into this. So activation energy, it basically when you're creating a chemical reaction, you put two molecules or two chemicals together. Nothing really happens. I mean, it can, but usually you need something to get that started, whether that's heat, energy in some form, something to get the reaction going, right? And so that's your activation energy. It's when you're talking about a reaction, it's a higher level of energy that is going to happen before you can get a product out of those two chemicals. So when you have activation energy, you got to get up over this hump and then back down to the other side before you get any products out of it. And that's that activation energy. And so you always, like in a reaction, you put a couple things together, and then like the reaction, it doesn't really like get started until you get up over that hump of that higher energy up here, and then it kind of comes back down and levels out, and that's where that reaction is taking place. So you have something starting out, and then something finishing, and in the meantime, in the middle there, you got to get some energy into that to get that reaction going.
So in really simple terms, this is why when you take like a college chemistry class, you usually are like heating it up on one of those burners, right? Like that's putting the energy into, you can't just take molecules and like stir them together in a little pot. Sometimes you can, like really reactive ones you can, but then those ones tend to explode in your face, right? So
yeah, exactly.
So like you have to put this energy in to get it to take hold. And then once the reaction starts going, then it kind of in a lot of cases can continue. I mean, I'm not a chemical engineer, so you can correct me, but like I'm thinking of fire, and I know it's not. We're being a little loosey goosey with the term here, but like it takes a lot of energy to get a fire going, but then you get it going, and it kind of can have its own chain reaction. That's a little different concept.
Yeah, it's perpetuating. It's going. That reaction is continuing until all of the reactants run out, basically, until you use everything up and everything is converted into the new product. Same thing with the log and fire. You're creating a chemical reaction, that log's burning, and then when that log is when it's all ash and all carbon and then CO2 and water, your fire goes out because the reaction's done. So you need some activation energy to get that going. And so in this case, like that might be like you got to heat it up to some temperature in order to get that reaction to continue to go, right? For burning something.
All right. So for all the people listening who hate engineering, who hate this kind of stuff, we'll move forward quickly. We promise. And I promise us he's going to get to stuff that's going to matter to you. So hang with us here, but tell us on top of that, tell us what a catalyst does.
All right. So when you're trying to get a reaction to go, a catalyst actually makes that reaction either go faster or makes it so that it takes place under lower energy state. So it's easier to get it going. So you might take, it's basically, you can say that it's lowering that activation energy, right? So that you have you're starting with a couple of chemicals, and then you end with something, and then it's more like a flat line across it, and there's no big energy spike. Technically, it's not lowering that activation energy, but the catalyst is making that reaction happen faster or easier, and so it kind of takes that step out of it.
The presence of this other thing that's not actually part of it's not part of the reaction that you're going for, but its presence accelerates it, makes it easier. Everything kind of happens at a much with the presence of the catalyst. It happens easier.
It happens easier, right? Yeah, easier and faster. Like I like this analogy. Like say you want to get you tell a person, I'm going to have you get up on this table. Joey, you can either jump up onto that table or you can take the step stool and put the step stool there and then get on the table. It's a lot easier to use the step stool and break that jump into two smaller pieces than it is to tell Joey to make that one big jump. So it's kind of like that. It's just making that reaction a lot easier.
No, Max, I'm going to jump, dude.
I know you're going to jump, and it's
I'm
like
going to jump.
A box jump. You're going to scrape your shins. You're going to nail it.
I'm going to clear it. I'm clearing it, dude. They don't call me, my friends call me Thunder Thighs, man. Come on. I'm going to use those.
All right. So twitch muscles.
Yeah. And one kind of, I looked up a common everyday reaction that uses catalysts, and one is in a car. So like the car drives, it burns the fuel, and out flies the exhaust into what is called the catalytic converter that has a bunch of metals, has like various precious metals actually in there. And those metals cause a reaction to happen that prevents the exhaust from polluting the air. So it cleans the exhaust quite a bit because the reactions take place right there in the catalytic converter. So that's kind of a cool everyday example. So, all right. So enough of the technical discussion. That's kind of the basis of this conversation. But why?
If I were looking at the crowd right now, all the eyes would just be glazed over, kind of like in chemistry class right now. Like everybody'd be like, I'd be half asleep. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can wrap up the podcast now. I mean, that was a great episode.
Everybody's asleep.
Okay. So no, this is actually a really amazing concept, because what you can do is you can take this.
It's going to be good.
Yeah. Stick with this. This is good. We're both engineers, so we're saying that. But like, I love it when there's some physical concept out there that you can apply to human psychology and it works amazing. And I think that's 100% the case in this situation. So why does activation energy and catalysts and all of this discussion around putting energy into a reaction matter? Well, as we all know, warming, like getting started on a run or a workout or whatever activity you have in front of you, like for me, it's so hard sometimes to just get out of my desk here or wherever I am and just get my shoes on and start. And then usually once I start, that's like the hardest part. And it's true not only for me in running, but like even in work. Like if I have a big thing I got to get done, I just sit there, and I think that's why people procrastinate or why we don't train, because we just sit there and we're like, I don't want to dive into this, but then give it 5 minutes and it's like starts to carry itself forward, right? Like the whole reaction starts to happen. And I think I've talked to numerous pros on this podcast, and one theme that has come up is consistency is huge for our fitness. If we can get out every day or close to every day, that alone can just change the game completely. And so that's why it's relevant here. I'm curious, Max, from a pro standpoint. I'm an everyday runner. I'm an amateur, right? I'm like most of the people that are probably listening to this podcast. But do pros have to deal with a lack of motivation to get out for a run as well? Or is that just the Joeys of the world here?
No, I mean, that's everybody, man. Like I always struggle with getting out the door. Like I'll be sitting here at my computer, and it's just so much easier just to stay in this state than it is to like get up, change, get out the door for a run. And so sometimes I'll just do it. I'll just sit here like working until it's too late. And like I meant to go for a 2-hour run, and now I've only got time for an hour run. And I continually do that like almost every day. And so like I've got to get myself motivated and just tell myself I got to get out the door. Like now, if I'm going to get that run in that I had planned. And so, yeah, I'm always procrastinating. I swear I'd be a lot fitter if, I could lower that activation energy, right? If I could make that a lot easier to get out the door and get those workouts in.
Well, that's a perfect segue. Thanks for bringing that up, Max.
Of course.
Because now let's change gears into let's do a little ping pong match of our favorite catalysts for getting out the door. Like, what is it that's going to lower that activation energy and get us over the hump so that every day we can start? So why don't you go first? Tell us your number one
Well, I mean, okay, so my
way of doing
number
that?
one, I've been thinking about this a lot lately because in the off season right now, like it's kind of hard to get out the door, right? Like it's cold
Mm,
outside. Like just talking about that activation energy of like what it is, it's like for me, it's like having to get up from my warm desk here and get clothes on and get out the door, and it's 30 degrees outside and sometimes snowing, sometimes it's just raining, and I don't want to do that. Like that's not that much fun.
mm,
But the one thing that like keeps me getting out the door though is when I sign up for a race. I'm like, oh shoot, I have like whatever it might be, 100K, 100 miler in March. It's like I have got to get myself out the door if this like if I'm going to get through this race, right? So my number one is sign up for a race, and I have a feeling like there are a number of people out there that are listening to this that's exactly what they do is they sign up for a race to keep themselves motivated throughout the year. And you sign up for races kind of like on a like like throughout the year so you can kind of keep yourself motivated, like if you ever don't
yeah.
have one on the calendar, you're like, well, I don't have anything coming up, so I'm just going to sit around now. So, and I
Yeah.
got this email the other day, I think it was from Ultra Sign Up, said sign up for a race, be 42% more motivated this year. I was like, oh yeah, like exactly. I mean, that's like totally, it's such a huge amount of that motivation is signing up for a race. So that's my number one.
That is awesome. Yep. I couldn't agree more. And there's an activation energy to signing up for a race too.
Yeah, there
like
is.
like it's really hard for me to click like, okay, I'm doing this. All right, let's go. Right. But that's an awesome one because once you do that, yeah, that becomes like getting over that activation energy becomes the catalyst for every workout from now until then, right?
Yeah.
So that's
Well,
that's pretty awesome.
you talk about the activation energy for signing up for a race, and that's not getting any easier because, like, I have a feeling like probably 99% of the people that are on the Tracer podcast that are listening to it are they've signed up for a race, right? That's how they stay motivated, and the reason they're on this podcast listening to it or even know about Tracer is they race, right?
Hmm.
And so that's a lot of the runners out there. Probably the majority of them are racers, and they run to stay fit, to race, and things like that, to have adventures. But it's the racing that really kind of like gets them out there. But it's getting harder because it's expensive, right? Like it's not getting any cheaper to go to races, and that is definitely a concern with people of like that activation energy actually for signing up for a race. There's travel involved usually, unless it's a super local race. There's entry fees, there's nutrition products to buy, there's gear to buy, all that sort of stuff. That when you do sign up for a race, you've also got those hurdles in there that you got to think about. And the kind of the way that I mean, I love to race. I sign up for races all the time, but there are other options out there to kind of keep you motivated in terms of these events, right? There's FKTs that you can put on your calendar and say, this date I'm going to do this big run, or something like that, or there's this event that I want to do, that's maybe not a race, but I want to do it. I want to have fun at it, and it's on this date. So things that have a date can kind of help motivate you a lot better than things without a date.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. That's awesome. And by the way, the word, and maybe you don't know this, Max, but the name Tracer for our app, it comes from training and racing, Tracer.
Oh,
So that's kind of
yeah,
cool, right?
that is cool.
Yeah. Okay, so here's my number one catalyst for motivating yourself for consistency: friends. I have a group of people that go at 5:30, and I'm not a 5:30 a.m. guy. But if I commit to going 9 times out of 10, I'll go. Unless I have like a really bad night and I didn't sleep or something, then maybe I'll bail. But if I can just get like a friend, I know they're going to be waiting for me and I've committed to being there with them, that will get me out the door. And even this morning, I went skiing with a friend. We went up to Snow Basin and skinned a lap up at the resort there before it opened. And woke up, and I guarantee I would have turned off the alarm and gone back to bed had he not been there this morning. Cause I just, I feel that morning tiredness. but I knew he was going to be there, and I got out and we had a great time. It was a beautiful morning and no regrets whatsoever getting my butt out of bed. And it was it's friends that do that for me frequently. And that's, committing to training runs, but it's also for you, to your point, signing up for a race and then knowing that a friend's going to be there with you. Like that's super. It's like, we're going to do this together. This is going to be a blast. Right. And
Yeah.
you can, there's some races you do, I guess with, I'm thinking Schemo right now. So you do some partner races. That's, you're really committing to each other. But even if you're just racing together, that can be awesome. So my number one would be friends. So ping pong, back to you. Or what are your thoughts on friends?
Well,
And
just
then give us your
I
next
wanted
one.
to add to that because you're talking about a 5:30 a.m. wintertime run or ski, and the activation energy for me is through the roof on that one. And it's going to take more than friends to get me out the door. Like I'd never do that on my own, right? And then every once in a while, like if I have a good friend, they've got to be a really good friend to get me out the door that early for a run. So otherwise, that activation energy is just too high for like sometimes even friends won't get me out the door. And
Even if we make a PB&J for you.
even if you make a PB&J for me, sometimes if a breakfast burrito is involved, that will help
Ooh,
lower that activation energy slightly. But yeah, it's like those early morning runs, I have a hard time. But like you, I like once I'm out there, I never regret it. Right? I love being
yeah.
out there. It's just getting out there is so hard. I've told people I have two conditions that I will wake up that early for. One is to climb mountains, and two is to catch a flight. And those are my only two conditions. So
There you
sometimes, like
go.
if it's just a run around town, not gonna happen. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah. You see that like training is all about this. And that's why I wanted to have this episode with you, because it's easy to blow off, but like this is where the real magic happens, right? Is those first few steps, those getting out of bed moments. Like that's where you're actually putting in a huge amount of the emotional energy, and then the physical follows it.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And you gotta reduce that, like you're talking about, lower that activation energy
Yeah.
to get out the door. So
We need a trick. We need little hacks and little tricks to kind of like get us to do that. Okay, so what's your next one?
okay, so the next one is temperature. So just
Hmm.
like a chemical reaction, the warmer it is, the easier it's going to be for me to get out the door. So
Hmm.
or get a run in, right? So like what I'll do this time of year is just I'll hop on my treadmill. It's right there.
Oh,
I can, I put a movie on or whatever, but it's so much easier for me to like get shorts and a t-shirt on and jump on my treadmill in my room than it is to like get my tights
yeah.
on, get like a base layer on, get a jacket on, get a hat, gloves, all that stuff. So like sometimes like just having a treadmill right here in my room makes it a lot easier and just easier to get my run in the morning. So
Yeah, totally. When the weather's just nasty and you're like, I don't want to go out there, man. And you got a nice little treadmill. I mean, 100%.
it
It's
makes it easier.
boring. I will admit it's
It
not as,
is.
but if you live in a place, if you're in Southern California right now, this one doesn't matter to you. But if you're in Salt Lake City or Bend, Oregon or wherever, where you have to deal with like sloppy, you're in the slush or freezing cold, that makes 100% sense to me. I would also throw on this. You can also, like you say, you throw on like something to watch or listen to while you're doing it,
Yeah.
and that just kind of adds to it.
I can't even like do an easy run on my treadmill without actually watching something, like taking my full attention away from just going slowly. I'll do a workout, listen to music or something, and that's fine, but I can't just do an easy run. It's too mind numbing for me. But I'll go outside and run it like, hours and hours, and that's easy. But like running inside, it's got to take my attention off of that. So sometimes I use that just to get it in. And being warmer, it's kind of nice sometimes. And even doing workouts in the wintertime, like if it's icy outside, and you're not going to be able to get that speed in that you would be able to like when it's warm or on a track or a good surface. I'll do it on the treadmill inside, and it just makes my workout go a lot better. It's safer too, honestly. Like it just prevents injuries and stuff like that if you're slipping around outside. So,
Yeah, awesome.
what else you
Uh,
got?
My next one is what we're doing right now, which is podcast. This
Oh,
podcast can be your activation energy. You can subscribe to this podcast,
no, this is your
and
catalyst.
next time an episode comes out and you see it come in on your phone or whatever on your YouTube, because we do this on both YouTube and on an audio podcast. But like I do that. Like I have a list of my favorite podcasts I'm subscribed to. My app tells me when new episodes come in. And when a new one comes up, I'm like, oh, yes, I love that. And then I know that I want to listen to it. And so I just get out, I take my headphones and I'm like, I don't care how I feel. I'll just go easy and I'm going to be listening to this podcast. It's kind of like when you start doubling a little bit what you're doing, it takes the pressure off of having to, you don't always have to have like a great run. You don't have to feel great. You're kind of doubling what you're doing. Or like if like a sports team that I really like, say like the national championship football tournaments going on right now, the playoffs, and I love to watch those games. If that game's on, why can't I just sit on the treadmill and watch that game? Because I'd just be sitting on the couch anyway, and I can go as easy as I want. That's what I tell myself is like, just it doesn't. I don't. Not every day has to be a workout, nor should it be. And so I can spend my time in two different ways, and that seems to take a burden off of me when I do that.
That's a great way to get those zone one workouts in, you know, when you're just kind of like chilling, you need some aerobic capacity. Yeah, it's a great way to do it. So
Yeah,
I've never really been able to listen to podcasts. It's funny, like I occasionally I will, but
Maxwell.
I know it, but I don't very often, right? Not listen to podcasts, but listen to podcasts when I'm running.
This one you listen to every time though, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I love
Okay.
podcasts. I don't listen to them when I'm running though. Like
Oh, I see. I see.
I listen to podcasts all the time, but once in a while, like and I know some people probably like struggle with this of like, oh, I'm going for a run, but really I should be doing something else like more valuable, like I should be working or learning something, and so like it can be kind of like a double, like you get like your workout in, but also learn something too, and you're kind of
Mm-hmm.
multitasking at the same time, and so that's kind of good, and so what I'm going to try to do, I haven't done this yet, is I want to start downloading books and listening to books while I'm out on these like really
Oh
long
yeah.
runs to try to take my mind off the run when you know, I get bored after a while. And so I want to download some books and actually do like some audio books when I'm out there on a run, so I can like because I don't have time to read. And if I'm running for that long, it's like, well, I feel like I need to be doing at least something else valuable. So I'll try listening to some books. So I got Moby Dick
Yeah.
on my list. I've never read Moby Dick,
Ooh,
and it's been on my list for a long time. So I'm gonna try that.
you're gonna have to go on some long runs
I
to get
know.
through that one,
Well,
man.
I'm gonna be going on some long runs here pretty soon. Let me tell you, and you'll find
Yeah.
out why later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I've got a hunch,
Yeah.
but we won't talk about it.
No.
Yeah. In fact, there's a book called Atomic Habits that I listened to audiobook while I was running, and it's all about creating habits in your life and, what really changes the way you behave. And one of the concepts is this idea of like lead in processes. Like if you want to change your running, you also have to change the habits that lead into running.
Hmm.
And that's just one of the concepts that they talk about in a book called Atomic Habits. But I thought it was relevant here. You brought up audiobooks, and that was one that I recently listened to that is congruent with everything that we're talking about here.
Cool.
So podcast, music / books, great way to kind of get fired up to get out and move and do that. So what's your next one?
Next one is so a coach, right? That
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times, like I have been self-coached for a very long time, but I do like I'm pretty self-motivated, but I do realize like, man, some days like if I had a coach just putting like had a schedule from a coach, like, and I just knew what I had to do, it'd be a lot easier to, to get it in than to be like, well, what should I do today? Should I do a workout or should I do an easy run? Well, I'll just do an easy run. Now I can, if I'm doing an easy run, I can just put it off until later in the day, that sort of thing. So if I had a schedule from a coach, a lot of times that would lower that activation energy and get me out the door a little bit easier. So having a coach is pretty valuable. And I will say that just, you know,
Yeah.
and I hear that from a lot of people of just like, why do you have a coach? Like, you know what to do. And they're like, well, yeah, it just takes the guessing game out of it and just gives me something I can do every day. So
Yeah. You were my first coach. And the story behind this is that I was getting ready to run my first 50 miler. I had done a few 50Ks, and I signed up for this 50 miler. And that was about at the time that you and I started working on Tracer. So it totally made sense to just, Tracer wasn't quite ready. I couldn't really get coached by you through Tracer. So we were doing it in the background. And I remember you gave me the calendars and I would go through it. And I don't need a coach to get out. Like, I can do that on my own. But what I noticed is exactly what you're saying, that like when a coach gives you the schedule, your focus becomes less on what should I do today and more just on executing. And it really does act as a catalyst. Like, it takes the burden of what should I do this week to, coach has me doing this. And of course you're going to modify that based on, if you got to change your schedule, if you don't feel right, those kinds of things will change you do need to listen to your body. You do need to modify. You can't just like blindly do what somebody tells you all the time. But it does just really it takes away that burden of having to decide. And I've noticed that. I definitely benefited from those early days when you coached me. Now I obviously use your programs on Tracer and some of the other ones, depending on what I'm doing. And maybe this is kind of like, shameless plug for Tracer, but I do want to bring it up, like what Tracer does in this context. Why don't you explain like how getting coached through Tracer, does it do the same thing you're saying or not? Like, how do you see it?
Well, I mean, like two different ways, right? Like, yeah, it's not a person telling you, like, so in some ways, like Tracer's awesome because it gives you that schedule, right? It gives you that schedule to follow, and at a very reasonable price, and that's kind of why we're doing this, right? But at the same time, you kind of know that there's not a person behind it, like your coach isn't telling you what to do. So I don't know if that has an effect or not on people.
Right.
I feel like it could potentially, of like people kind of putting things off, but at the same time, you've got that schedule. And so if that's what you're looking for and what helps you get out the door, like that's going to be that piece where you don't have to like guess at what you're doing or figure out what you're doing. Tracer gives that to you. And then the beauty of it is like, what we've talked about before is that if you do need to change it, it doesn't mess up the whole rest of the schedule. Like you can put something else in for that day and it's going to adjust the rest of your calendar for you so that it doesn't like, you're not trying to play catch up or just missing days and just trying to put in your own things and really having to figure that out. Like Tracer's already got that figured out for you. So you just move on to the next day, look at the next day when you wake up tomorrow, and go from there. And so it's like, that's the beauty of it. And it gives you that schedule where you don't have to figure things out.
Yeah. And Jason's the other co-founder for those listening. Jason and I have always said, like, if you can afford a coach and you have somebody who's really good, who's going to help you get results, who actually knows what they're talking about, by all means, like that is the best solution. But there is like low availability of really good coaches, and they're expensive because it has to be, right? Like it's a labor intensive, it takes a lot of attention to really coach somebody well. So it needs to be expensive to do it right. And so that kind of leaves some tension in the market because everyday people maybe can't afford to hire a Max King, but they also really need the schedule. And that's what Tracer does. Like that is our goal, is to put that technology right there in the middle. So it's like way better than a static plan. But of course, if you can afford a personal coach and you've got somebody and you can get a Max King, do it, because it's going to totally improve your fitness.
Yeah. Well, what else you got?
Okay.
Anything else?
All right. Yeah, I got one here.
Okay.
Strava segment cherry picking.
Oh God, no. I knew this was going to come up.
Yes. I love this one. In fact, one of my favorite videos, Jamil Corey has this video with his buddy. What's his buddy's name? I can't remember his buddy's name, but they're hilarious together. You can tell they're good friends. And they have this episode, I'm sure you can find it on YouTube, called Chasing Walmsley. And they went out and they found like Walmsley's, like in Phoenix, they found these like segments that Walmsley had the number one.
Yeah.
And they just like they warmed up and then they started their watch at the beginning and just like went all out. And one of them was Camelback Mountain. And if you've ever done Camelback, it's pretty hard. Like it's not super long, but it's like technical and it's hard. And they still couldn't get it. So they were like, dang, that didn't work. So they go out to this like obscure desert area and they like start their watches and they run down the hill as fast as they possibly can. And they're in the middle of nowhere and they don't even have reception. So they have to go back to the car to find out if they got the record. And turns out they did. And they jump up, they start cheering. I mean, it's hilarious. So go check out Chasing Walmsley. If I can remember, I'll put it in the description. I'll put a link to that. But
Nice.
back to the point here, which is like finding a little mini race that you can just like, hey, I want to go see if I can beat my time up the canyon here. Like near my house, I've got these little switchbacks. I'm like, I'm just feeling motivated to go push it today. Like I just need a little bit of a like race feel to it, right? So start your watch, go cherry pick it, go get the fastest time and do whatever. Sometimes that is motivating, and I'm totally cool with Strava cherry picking. I mean, that's totally kosher from my side.
Totally. I've never done that before, Joey. I don't know what that feels like. Never done it.
Yeah, I believe you. I believe you.
Yeah.
All right, what do you got?
I'm coming to the end of mine.
All right.
The smaller, lower down. That's not like, this is going to be helpful for some people, right? New gear, shoes, gear, something new to try out, right? So, just like that little thing of like, ooh, I want to go try that. Or I want to go use my new backpack. Or I want to go use my new shoes. Yep. And that'll kind of help get people out the door as well. A little bit of a catalyst to get you out there. So. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I've got a few others here. Maybe I'll go through them quickly and you can give me your responses. But these are fairly simple. Put your running clothes on. Like, say you just really don't want to go. You're just sitting there and you're in that moment of tension where you're just kind of like, I know I need to go and I just don't want to. Like, I don't feel good. I'm tired. I've been working all day or whatever it is. Okay, don't go, but go put your running shorts and your shoes and your socks and your shirt on and just sit around in that. I've actually done that before and
not gone
suddenly
for a run.
I'm like, what's that? And no. Like just start, like told myself I'm not going for a run, but I'm going to put on my running clothes, like as just a mental trick. And it goes back to this Atomic Habits book that has like this kind of thing where your psychology actually, like, once you take that first step, you feel like you're in your running clothes. And all of a sudden I'm like, I'm not that tired. So then like the next step is I can just walk for 5 minutes, walk up the road for 5 minutes towards the trail, right? Get in the car, drive towards the trailhead. I don't know, whatever it is, like just whatever. And then all of a sudden in your mind, like one reaction leads to another. And pretty soon I'm like out for a run. And there's been so many times where like my wife notices it, where I'm sitting there like, I don't want to go, And then I come back, she's like, how was your run? And I was like, pretty awesome. Like I had a great time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there it is. There's the activation energy again. And if you can't overcome that activation energy somehow, think of how much training you wouldn't do if you couldn't get over that. And that's why I'm like, this is such an important topic.
Yeah.
So thoughts on just start taking the steps and don't even commit to doing the whole thing. Like turn around if you have to.
I mean, that's interesting. Like I've never quite gone like, if I get back to my example of like the beginning of like the step stool up onto the table, right? Like you're taking and putting the step stool there, and then you're taking the step onto the step stool by changing into your running clothes. So you're like halfway there. Once you get out the door and you're walking, then you're like, well, I'm already out here now. I might as well go. And so, yeah, you're kind of topping out on that activation energy plot, and you're just like downhill from there. You might as well just go.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, totally, like you're getting over that hump and stuff. So it's a good way to do it. Like my issue is actually that taking that first step to actually change into those. So I don't know if you've ever done this, but you just sleep in your running clothes, and then when you wake up in the morning, you don't have to like roll out of bed and like change again and get
Mhm.
cold, especially in the winter. Like you're already in
Yeah.
your tights and your like thermal base layer, so you're like warm already, and then you just roll out the
Yeah.
door. I have
Yeah.
definitely never done that ever.
I have not actually done that, but maybe I need to try. I'm gonna sleep in like full blown ski boots, everything, gear,
Might
ready
as
to
well,
go.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, and like, isn't this just our sport in general? It's like, okay, I can think of about 100 times when your ladder idea totally matters. If you look if you look at it as a box jump where you just have to go from one level to the next, well, guess what? When you're at mile 64 in a 100 miler or mile 22 in a 50K, it doesn't matter. You're like overwhelmed by the amount of work you have to do all at once, right?
Yeah.
So you stop thinking that way and you just start thinking like, what do I need to do right now? Like, oh, I should probably drink and eat, right? I should probably just keep walking. I should probably, do whatever. And eventually you chip away and you even find new momentum later. Uh, there's all this hack. Oh, sorry. Were you going to say something there?
No.
Oh, okay. I thought I interrupted. So this hack can also be used, I think, with fueling, because sometimes I'm just like, oh, gross. I don't want to eat or drink anything. Like I'm maybe overheated or something. And so what I started doing was like, just put the bottle in your hand. Like you don't have to drink it. Just put the bottle in your hand. And so I do. And then like just like take a teeny sip, and like one thing leads to another. Or if it's like a gel, like I make my own gels now, as you know, and I put them in my own flask. But before, where it was like, just take the gel out and put it in your hand. Okay, just rip the tab off the top. Okay, just like get a quarter of it in, and pretty
Yeah.
soon, you've done the job.
Right.
So
Yeah.
a lot of wisdom in one step at a time, right?
Yeah. No, just breaking those bigger tasks up into little blocks, right? Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Okay, so put on your running clothes, start with a walk. And here's another little hack, and that is just tell yourself you can turn around at any point. Because I think when you tell yourself that you don't have to fully, if it's not your day, and let's face it, like as much as we want to have activation energy, there might be times when you're just like, I'm not feeling it, man. I mean, the guy I skied with today, I remember a time last year where we were skiing up. I got halfway up the run. I got like 800 feet into the ski going uphill, and I just knew it was not my day. Like something was off, and I was like, "I'll see you at the car, man. I'm gonna go sit in the lodge. I'll wait for you, and feel free to finish the run." And I called it. Like we don't have to always force ourselves through, but I think like there's wisdom in starting and seeing how you feel. And so, but I do think it takes a burden off of you to admit to yourself sometimes like, all right, I don't have to. I'll get out there and see how I feel. But if I'm not feeling good if I do a 20-minute warm up and I'm just like, no, this is not going to happen, turn around, come back.
Yeah.
So
You can definitely use that to get yourself out the door. And I think you should also use that on those runs where, like, if you really don't feel good, I mean, there are days, like you said, where you should just turn around. It should be more of a rest day or easy day, and your body's saying, "Okay, I need to rest." And so you'll have those, even though you want to get out there and you've gotten over that activation energy and that hump and gotten out the door. And you're like, "No, I need to finish this run." Well, some days you maybe shouldn't. So, yeah.
yeah, yep. I have two more here.
Man, you came up with a big
Number
list. It's a lot.
I did. I take my activation energy seriously, Maxwell. Cross training, right? Like you're training for a running race, you're not feeling it, your legs are beat up, you're sitting there saying like, I do not want to run right now. Okay. get your lightning rollerblades out and go take those for a spin, right? Get your bike out, get your skis. I mean, like for me, my skis are activation energy big time, like catalysts in the wintertime.
Mm.
Because when it is cold and it is snowy, my brain just goes to, oh, sweet, I'm going to go enjoy my skiing, not my running. And that, is a like finding something that you're psyched to do in the moment is a catalyst. It's a way to continue your aerobic development and get out there and stay moving.
Yeah. That's funny because like for me, it's just the opposite. Like I'm always like, oh, I should go do something else today because it'd be really fun to go on a bike ride. God, it's just too hard to get like bibs on, get my bike out, get bike shoes on, pump up my tires. I'm just gonna go for a run. Like
This is why you need.
it's so much easier to go for a run for me than it is any of those other sports. That when I'm having that issue, it always ends up in a run because I'm like, a run's just so much easier.
Yeah. Yep. Shoes and socks, right?
Yeah, just as easier. So yeah, that's funny. I just have the opposite issue. But there are days where your body's just feeling pretty beat up, and you're like, man, I should go do something else. And
Yeah.
then mine usually turns back into a run because I'm like, it's just too hard to get out there and do anything else. So
Yeah. All right. So and that's a good point. Not all of these are going to work for you. And if you need to come up with your own list, right? Like you need to really think and say, what is it that can help me to feel a little bit better about taking those first steps, right?
yeah,
My last one is to have a snack and take a nap, like a cat nap. I've utilized this one. And, there are times when like I do a lot of evening running. I like to work in the day and then I like to train usually in the evening. And so what'll happen though is I'll be in the zone at work. I'm doing software. I'm working on Tracer. We're doing podcasts. We're doing this stuff. And then I get to 6 p.m. and I'm just sitting there like, oh man, I'm sleepy. Like and I realize that my blood sugar is low and I'm just tired from the day. So I'll go over like either eat dinner at 6 or have a snack and then just like lay on the couch. And usually I can fall asleep. Now this probably doesn't work for everybody, but for me, it does. I can fall asleep at 6 p.m. for like 10 minutes. And then I wake up and like the blood sugar is kind of processed a little bit. And all of a sudden my brain's in a totally different state where I'm like, running doesn't sound so bad right now.
Yeah.
So I get my butt out the door.
Yeah. No, I can see that for sure. No.
Yeah.
I came up with another one. So one thing that I like to do in order to kind of keep myself motivated throughout the week is plan like a destination run for later in the week or like, some point during the week. Maybe that's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, something like that, where I'm going to go explore something new. For one, it gets me like really motivated for the long run that day. Like I'm excited to go for a long run somewhere I've never been before. And so it's a lot easier for me to go run a long ways if I've never been there. And if it's exciting, I don't want to run, loops around my house or on another, like, something that I've done 100 times. So I'll use that for the motivation to get out for a long run on the weekend. But it also kind of helps me like look forward through the week of like, okay, I need to just go, run around the block, which my block, whatever, it's a 8-mile run around the hill here. It's sort of around the block.
An 8-mile run around the block, huh?
It's like around my butte. It's around the butte.
Okay.
8-mile run around the butte is like the thing that I do all the time. And like, I'm just like, okay, I got to get it in and I'm looking forward to the weekend. I just got to get this run in just an hour easy or whatever. And so I just do that. So those, those destination runs can kind of help you just stay motivated for, the end of the week, keep you moving through the week. So.
Yeah. Well, okay. So that's a great brainstorming session of catalysts that people can use. They need to, if you're listening to this, you probably need to sit down and think about what motivates you, what gets you out the door, and take it seriously. Because if you can get started, my guess is that like 80% of the time that you don't really want to go, but then you got started, probably ends up being decent, right? And ends up being a good training day. And if you don't overcome that, you're going to put, your volume's going to be way down. So, I was talking, if you go back and listen to the episode that I had with Tabor and Eli Hemming, I asked them at the end, I said, what is the number one training tip that you guys would give anybody? And their immediate answer was consistency, right? Like,
Yep.
If you're consistent, if you're getting out there very regularly, that is just a huge piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
So, do what you have to do to overcome that resistance that you feel. Of course, plug for Tracer, go check it out, tracerfitness.com. I believe it's a great catalyst because it takes the pressure off of you to know what to do and gets all your focus on just executing, while at the same time not being stupid about it, right? If you're not feeling right, your coach needs to know that, and your training program needs to react. Or maybe you can't get out because your boss said you're working overtime tonight, right? And you're going to be there till 10 p.m. and you have to shift your schedule. Tracer was designed to take to shift and move using AI and using the coach's data. Go check it out, learn more about it. I won't do the whole description here, but you get it. And that's why we built what we've built. And Max has been a big part of that. Max, I want to ask you one last question to wrap it up.
Okay.
You've been running and doing endurance sports for a really long time now. How have you been able, other than these ideas, like what do you attribute you being so motivated to put your life into this sport?
Well, I think you said it there, like put my life into it, right? So everything that I do kind of revolves around like how I perform. And so when I am thinking forward, like and I have a race on the calendar, I want to perform well. That really is kind of what gets me out the door every day, and makes me work hard, and makes me get in the consistency that I need to have in order to perform well at these events. And that's how it's always been. And so like, that's where my self-motivation comes from, is just wanting to be the best possible me that I can be when I step on the start line.
Yeah. Awesome. Hopefully that's helpful to everybody listening. Thanks again for joining me, Max. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, man.
I look forward to our next adventure, our next ski tour or whatever, next time you're here in Utah. And good luck in your training and in the big stuff that you have coming up. We'll be excited to hear any announcements that you may have in the near future.
All right.
All right, everybody. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man.